And that's working. Everyone can see that it's recording. Perfect. So, hi everybody. Welcome to the October Asian Wonder Woman Fireside Chat. We're joined today with Clover Lam, and I'm really excited to chat with her. I'm going to let her introduce herself afterwards, but I'm going to start with an introduction on Asian Wonder Woman as a whole. Whether you're new to the community or you're, a longtime follower, just a little bit about us. And the community started on Facebook and was founded by Ivy and Emily, and they created it in 2020 during the pandemic to provide a resource for women who are inspired to be nomadic. And whether that's working a remote job, a location independent, someone who's location independent, digital entrepreneur, an expat teaching English in a foreign country, a frequent traveler with a home base, or someone who deserves a nomadic life, Asian Wonder Woman is a space for you. And we were just talking about this a little bit before we started the recording, but you can meet so many wonderful humans in this community. And it was started and grown organically, and it's now over 2,000 plus women all over the globe. So it's really cool. And some of our biggest, bases where you can find a large population of the community are in cities like Taipei, New York, San Francisco, Toronto, and Singapore. So thank you everyone for joining us. And yeah, this is Clover. And I'll start with let us know who you are, Clover, and tell us a bit about your story.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me. I'm super honored to relate myself to the traveling community. I have been a flight attendant for 18 years, so I've been traveling for quite a bit. But I was actually quite shy, even as a flight attendant, and it was very comfortable just hanging out with the Asian community. And what really changed my life was my divorce 9 years ago when I turned 30. The pain was so bad that it really allowed me to reevaluate everything in my life. I started to question what it means to live an unconventional life where I was just traveling all over the world to places that I felt was outside my comfort zone. An example would be me going on a Hawaii trip, supposedly with a girlfriend, and she didn't make it the last minute. So I was just like, you know what, I'm just going to go anyways. And when I got there, for some reason, my instinct told me that I'm just going to do everything that scares me this week. And so I swam with sharks in open water. I went clubbing, which was very uncomfortable for me. I didn't like that. I went to the bar by myself. I was hit on by a guy. I kind of went out with him. So that feeling of empowerment that came with that trip really started the whole journey of solo traveling and exploring places that I would feel very intimidated by, like Nepal, Egypt. I went to Santorini, like Hawaii, all these romantic places by myself, doing solo tripod selfies, and really just enjoying my life. Where even though I was single and I am still single, surrounded by these honeymooners, I felt so at peace with myself that I was like, wow, it's almost a superpower. Like I didn't need anybody else. And so fast forward to just traveling, and right before the pandemic hit, traveling started to become interesting, but it started to slow down a little bit. I was more into slow traveling now. And when the pandemic hit, obviously we all couldn't travel. So I moved from Toronto, Canada, to Vancouver, because Toronto was extremely shut down for a whole year. So I couldn't take it. And Vancouver was a beautiful city. And so I had the chance to move there. And I then started creating a community called Unconventional Asians, because we're all really sitting at home pondering about our life. And that's when I met Emily. Actually, I interviewed her on my podcast back in the day, and that's why I have the connection now to be on the podcast. And during that time of reflection, I got into my spiritual awakening, if you've heard of that term, where I started to really hone into my authentic self. Previously, when I was traveling, it was all about self-development. Like, how do I, become a better person? But it comes from a place of lack. It's like, how do I fix myself? How can I be better? But with the pandemic, it was more healing. It was just like, how can I accept myself more and love myself more from a place of groundedness? And so with that, I started understanding the internal part of a being, right? After the divorce, it hurt me so much. I had to discover that. But also, everything that we do with traveling, it requires money. Let's be realistic. And so, how do I combine the best of both worlds where we can integrate it so we can become our highest authentic self, but at the same time have the financial resources to do whatever we want, which in this community is traveling and connecting with so many beautiful souls.
Oh, I love your story, honestly. So, Clover's story is a big part of why you'll find out, we'll talk about it later, but I became one of her clients later on as well. So, I've definitely gone through Clover's program as well. But her story is definitely part of what was so intriguing for me as to why I wanted to work with her. And I think her approach to life in general is something that I really relate to, but also her approach to money is something that I was like, oh, this is like a new perspective that I'd never really looked at money with. So it was really refreshing for me. And so to that point, maybe we can answer the important question of like, why is it important to master money as an Asian Wonder Woman?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Well, thank you. I was like so honored to have you as my client, and we can talk more about that later. That when I got divorced, I actually married a finance bro. And so there was a lot of jargons and everything else that felt extremely intimidating as an Asian woman, or I mean, any woman in general. And when we, went our separate ways, I realized I knew nothing. I completely relied on him. And now I'm like, I gotta figure this out. I got really scared. And so I went down the internet rabbit hole and learned everything about money. I was lucky to have a little bit of money that was given to me from the divorce, from the settlement. And so I bought a condo with that, just enough for a down payment. Back then, it was a lot cheaper to afford. And I was still traveling a lot on the side, so much so that I was only home 10 days a month. And so then I started questioning, like, do I even want to hold this as an investment? Or do I want to like just, maybe be a landlord? And when I was pondering that question, I was talking about it, and another flight attendant asked, would you actually consider selling it and renting instead? But to an Asian, person who's
Mhm.
into real estate, it was like, why would I do that? Like, that's stupid. Of course, like own your real estate. And she's like, read this blog called Millennial Revolution. And that opened my eyes up to the community called FIRE, Financially Independent Retire Early. And it really teaches me the concept of money attaching with your values, and questioning, does real estate actually make sense as an investment? Are there alternative ways to grow your net worth while you live the lifestyle you want? And so, because I did a lot of research, I realized for me specifically that letting go of that condo, renting a room, and then traveling the world using that equity to invest was kind of the best of both worlds for me. Even though it's extremely scary to my brain because everybody else was saying this is stupid and crazy. But I had to own that truth. And it's been 5, 6 years since I've done that. And I've never looked back. And it was like the best decision I made. But I had to go through that fear of the unknown. Um, so with money, coming back to why it's so important to Asian Wonder Women to master money, is first you have to understand the education, how money actually works, instead of buying into the misconceptions that most of us are taught, not just by Asian community, but the community in general, and realizing what your true values are. And everyone is so different, especially our community here who loves to travel, who most likely honor freedom, might look at this very differently. And, traveling requires a lot of money. But at the same time, we want to feel safe enough to build our net worth. And with my divorce, we realized that it's better not to rely on some other man and be your own money manager. So yeah, that's why money is so important as a woman to master and learn.
Yeah, and you've touched on so many things since actually we've started the chat that I'm like, oh, I want to dig into so many things because When you first talked about traveling and doing scary things, I think a lot of us think about scary as in going places that are unsafe. I think that's the first thought. But you talked a lot about how it felt scary in an emotional way to visit places that were typically known to be for couples, but you were traveling solo there. And I think that's a really interesting topic we can dive into another time as well, because yeah, fear comes in many forms, right? And then the money fear is also like, how do I sustain myself long term to be able to do all the things I love? And I think that's a huge thing that we're all thinking about. I know Christine and I have talked about this as well outside of this chat, where we're like, what is that number? What is that number that will make us feel secure enough to feel like we can leave it all behind and like start fresh and all those things? And then to your point about selling real estate, my brain can't even comprehend, because I think that is like the messaging from our parents for our whole lives, being like, the end goal is you want to own real estate, so own it, buy it, and then to sell it. That seems crazy to me. So that must have been a huge, like, huge leap of faith for yourself internally to do that, because I'm sure you had the same messaging growing up.
Yeah. And I did like the whole pros and cons list. I put it on the spreadsheets, all types of scenarios, how it would be like to if I kept the condo, if I rented out as a landlord, or if I just rent a room, what would look like, what would the numbers look like? But of course, that's just speculation. We don't know exactly how the market will go. But ultimately, it came down to one thing: which decision would I make that I would not regret? The top regret of the dying is that you live a life like people wish that they live a life true to themselves, not to what other people think of them. And I really lived by that. And that's why I knew my truth was that flexibility, freedom, it's like top of my list in terms of values. When everybody else doesn't understand that, it doesn't matter anymore. And when I made that decision, I was so excited. Like the gut feeling, it's scary, but it's also expansive. It's not a contractive type of fear. It's like this, like, wow, the possibility of like
Yeah.
life, like just unfolded. And so I knew I made the right decision then.
Amazing. And this is the perfect segue into value systems and what it means to take a holistic approach to money. If you could tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, for sure. Um, like I said before, because there's so much noise and programming from society or family or friends, to really like know your North Star of what decision you should make, that sounds like authentic to you. You really need to understand your values. And most of the time, they don't change. They might evolve depending, what phase of life you're in, but they're usually a set of values, and you can actually look back in your life and there's a pattern to it. And once you understand what they are, now the decisions that you make going through life becomes a lot clearer. And then the other opinions from other people no longer become relevant. And when you go through life like that, it feels so much more fulfilling.
Mhm.
Instead of like you drifting away and listen to this person and that person, and then you're like, wait, did I even make the right decision? Or is it come from your true authentic self? And yeah, so that part of it is very important to understand first before, and also knowing what blocks are in the way mentally, emotionally, in your limiting beliefs, all of that. So then that is unblocked. Then we can look at the strategy of money with the education. So then it becomes like a holistic plan in which you can carry out to how you want to live your life. And so it's kind of like having the perfect diet plan. You can have like the perfect calorie count, all the vegetables and protein and carbs that you need to eat. But if you don't stick to it, that plan is completely useless. And
Mhm.
so in the financial world right now, people are usually just giving you that part of strategy, the perfect plan, but they never really consider the behavioral part of it, which is very psychological and emotional. So the way I approach money, it's because of my own experience, understanding the both sides of the brain, the internal and the external, and that's why I kind of integrate them together.
Yeah, and this is exactly how Clover starts with the program, which when she first introduced it to me, she was telling me like the first bit is a little bit like therapy, which it honestly is. It's like money therapy, probably stuff that you've never taken a hard look at, and you think about, where do your ideas around money, how have they formed through your lifetime, and what's the word I'm looking for? What is like impacted? No. What have you been exposed to, I
Okay.
suppose?
Yeah.
Hmm. And so it's yeah, it was like the beginning was hard. The beginning was hard, but then it gets easier. So I think it's really great for you to experience that though, because to have someone prompt me with those types of questions that I would never have thought about before, it was really helpful to understand, yeah, how much this like emotional, psychological part of my brain, the value system part of my brain impacted my money decisions. I had never considered that before. So that was eye-opening for me. And so on that point as well, what do you think are some misconceptions about money and then how would people overcome them?
Yeah, I would say the real estate part for sure.
Mhm.
It's one form of investment. Most people think that it does go up, of course, over time, but so does stocks. But most people have experience with real estate, but less experience with stocks, and so they gravitate towards what's familiar, especially with if the parents pass it down and all of that. But there's also a lot of hidden costs with real estate. When I made my decision to sell my condo, I actually looked at my dad's investment. He bought the house mortgage free 20 years ago at $270,000 Canadian, which is like nothing. And it's
Mhm.
like a whole big plot of land. So it's like such a deal. And then he sold it for 1.6 million. So to you, it's like, whoa, he made like $1.3 million in 20 years. So like, duh, like it went up so much. But if I were to actually break that down, it's actually only about a 10% increase per year of that investment. Now, if you actually put the same amount of money into the stock market in a conservative enough that grows at the same time, it would actually amount to the same value. But then it would be a lot more flexible. Now, people would argue, well, you're throwing money away with rent and everything. But the thing is, like the property taxes, whenever you sell, the realtor fees, all the repairs that you have to make with the house, those money are going down the drain too. So that part of the equation, people never think about. And so if you actually look at the broad picture, at the end of the day, some real estate investment might be a really good deal. It depends on the area that you live in, but a lot of major cities like San Francisco, New York, Toronto, they're way too overpriced right now for it to justify as an investment. So that's a huge misconception there. Also, with stocks, being Asian, they're like, oh, you're gambling money away. But only if you do day trading or you're like stock picking without knowing what you're doing. But if you do kind of the index funds where it's safe, it's conservative, but it still grows, it's actually way more diversified than you putting all your eggs in one basket in one real estate. But of course, it's okay to buy real estate if that's what you value. I think it's just like important to understand the math behind these two different ways to invest and matching that again with your value system, right? And especially nowadays, getting into the real estate market is super hard and difficult versus with buying investments like stocks, ETFs, all of that. You just need like $50 a month to start and to grow your nest egg instead of doing nothing at all, because a lot of us are discouraged with real estate with how expensive it is. So yeah, so I think like these are kind of the two major misconceptions, and having the education with it, and also emotionally regulating yourself as well as you make those decisions are so important. I actually just got certified in an embodiment coaching certificate to help people actually process their emotions. And so this is an added on now in my coaching program to help them with that.
Amazing. Yeah, I think it took me dating a Caucasian man to open my eyes about some of my money misconceptions because
Mhm.
a few years ago I was dating this guy who told me like renting is the best thing ever and I was like I don't understand. I don't know what you mean. And he explained he was like it gives me so much freedom. Like I've been renting this place for 10 years, so I've been grandfathered into the rental price, so it's really good. And then not only that, but today if I wanted to move to another part of the world, it would be so easy for me to just pick up and go because I don't have to worry about this property. I don't need to worry about either I want to sell it, I want to become a landlord. Like, what is it I'm going to do with this thing just sitting here? I don't want it to just sit here and do nothing. And so he was like, for me, renting offers me this freedom to be nomadic, right? If that's what I want to be, I can be that. So I think in a lot of ways, renting property can be really uh, like a really interesting idea for us to consider as Asian Wonder Women, women who really value travel and a nomadic lifestyle. Renting is not the worst thing, as our parents have led us to believe. And then to Clover's point, I think a lot of people get really discouraged when they think, oh, I only have $50 right now. What can I do with it? There's no way I can invest in myself and grow. But the reality is like every little bit you put towards an investment makes a difference. So even if you only have that $50, if you start today, that is the difference between you and somebody else who also has $50, but they choose to do nothing with it, right? So if you choose to invest it, the only difference between you and them is the time. The sooner you start, the better. So those are definitely important things to look at. So who do you think is a good fit for your type of program and for coaching?
Yeah. For people who really want to try to change their relationship with money, understand and clarify what they want out of life, and create a strategy around it. Like you said before, it's deep work, like especially the first few sessions. And so it really takes a bit of dedication to really like want to become better. Of course, I'll be there to guide you, but ultimately it's up to you as well to do the work. But once you've set up that foundation, it's a skill set that you can take for the rest of your life. And so, with money coaching, what is the difference between that versus like financial advisor, for example? Financial advisors are there to kind of provide the products for you or do the managing for you. But because from my personal experience, it's so important for us to understand how it works, like the principles behind money. So if anything happens, you know how to shift it, you know how to do anything with it, um, versus just kind of like letting your power, like letting go of your power basically to someone else and letting them manage it. But I mean, it's always still good to do something with it, especially at the beginning stage where you're investing or doing anything with money, to start maybe a transition of someone managing, and then slowly, learn how to do it yourself and then go that way. And so it could be a combination of both as well. But to me, it's so important to take back your control and understand how money works.
Yeah, it's extremely empowering to know what exactly is going on with your money and to be in control of it. Because I know, similar to Clover, I was dating a finance bro. This is a different guy, but I was dating a finance bro years ago, and he helped me put my money into a bunch of investments. So when I was working with Clover, I was like, so these have been here. I don't know what they are. I don't know what they do, but they've been here, and I don't know how to deal with them. So I need your help. And so to have someone else take care of your money for you, sure, it's like, okay, easy, pass it off. But also when it comes time for you to have to understand it yourself and you're just like, whoa, this is like these are my assets, but I don't know anything about them. It's a pretty like unsettling feeling. So it's really empowering to be able to know what you can and how to handle your money. So it's a really important life skill. So maybe we talk a bit about the program and you can disclose as much as you want about, the secrets behind your program, give people a little peek inside, and I can talk about my experience with it afterwards.
Yeah, for sure. So we have 6 sessions now. And the first session, we go through our value system and prioritize them in order. I love this quote from Oprah. She says, "You can have anything in life, but not all at once." Because sometimes we want like everything, right? But it's okay to want all of that, but maybe they come in different phases in your life. And so first we want to see what the orders are in value, and then we can adjust your plan accordingly. And then knowing what you authentically want out of your lifestyle. That's the first session. The second session, we go through money relationships. What are the blockages? What are the programming that you picked up from society? And now processing those emotions that come with it with my embodiment coaching certificate now, allowing those emotions to pass. And so then whenever you feel maybe triggered or scared with money, we can now have a tool to go through them. And then we look at your financial health, exactly how you spend money, your spending pattern, what assets you own, how much you owe, the really comprehensive snapshot of what you have in terms of money. This is a pretty powerful one for a lot of people, because when you actually see everything on paper, you're like, oh, the awareness. It might be a bit scary, but this is absolutely no judgment. I think the most important part is have as like no shame whatsoever with your money, because it's the emotion of shame that actually keeps you stuck. And so I really create a safe zone where you can be vulnerable with your situation, and we're here to figure it out together. And especially, I was very intimidated by the finance book culture. I make it a point to feel extremely safe. After that, we educate you on the financial education. I only give you information that you need to know. It's so much information out there. It's so conflicting that it's just like too much. So enough principles that you're like, it will empower you to move forward. Because once you know how money works, you're like, oh my God, it compounds like that. I only need to like spend a little bit of money and it will compound so much in the future. And then it motivates you to take action. And lastly, we put the plan together so that you have clarity in what kind of steps you need to take that is personalized. And lastly, integrating everything together. If there's any logistics issues or anything that we need to navigate, or we need to go back to previous sessions on any questions, we can round everything out together. And in between, there's the Voxer app that we use to communicate if there are any questions. We have a shared Google folder with all the recordings that you can watch, all the homework, all the journaling that is in it. And so then you can have everything in one place, and you have access to it pretty much as long as it lives in the Google Drive. And so I want you to really succeed as much as possible with your money, because it's like very personal to me how empowering it felt. And I want more and more women to do the same. Really, like I really think the world will change when we have like, we don't settle for anything like relationships or lifestyle, when we actually know how this works. So yeah, that's in a nutshell, how my program looks like.
Mm-hmm. I had an aha moment as you were talking just now, which was this may or may not be something you want to associate with your branding, but I think it's a good thing. It can be pro or con, but you add a touch of feminine energy to
Mhm.
finance,
Yeah.
right? Because we've talked about finance bros a lot this session, and it's a term that floats around a lot. And I think obviously we think of it about it like it's a man's world, and like men are involved in all things money, so that's what we associate it with. But to have a feminine energy attached to it with this type of program is really wonderful, because it takes a whole different approach, honestly, a whole different approach to how you want to look at your money, especially with the whole, we normally just focus on the strategy, like you said, and like the financial literature and all those things, but to take emotion and value into place, like those are very important. So I really appreciated that. So a little bit about what it was like for me to do the program. So I initially, like the time in which I met Clover was perfect timing, because I had already been thinking a little bit about like, oh, there are these investments that my ex helped me invest into. So what am I going to do with them? And I was thinking like, oh, I haven't, reorganized my finances in a while. I'm invested in a couple different places, but I'm not super familiar with what they're each doing. So maybe it's time I get some help with this. And so it was like very kismet timing that I was introduced to Clover. And her and I connected because she's a flight attendant and I'm a former flight attendant. And so as we kept talking and she kept telling me about her story of like, oh, other than being a flight attendant, I'm also a money coach. I was like, whoa, wait, perfect. Let's talk more about money. Forget about flight attendant stuff. Let's talk about money. And so I went through the program with Clover, and value systems to me, I think there are like many metaphors to it. So like Clover was talking about how it can be like a nutrition plan. I think of it a bit like associated with my interest, which is human relationships. So the way I think about it is like learning about your love languages or learning about your attachment styles. And then once you learn about it, you got to do something with it. So you can be really, really self-aware and know all about those things, but then if you don't use what you've learned to make a change, nothing will change, right? So when Clover and I went through the program, she was telling me that I am someone who I consider myself to be like basic understanding of finance, but I would say I'm like between basic and intermediate is what we figured out. I'm not like the most like starting from zero, but I'm also not super knowledgeable. And I think it's because there is so much information about finance out in the world that it can be really overwhelming to take the time to learn about each aspect of it, because you can get sucked into different areas and not understand, or you fall into a rabbit hole of like, oh, so this is how this works, but it's also related to this, and oh, now I need to learn about how this works, and then maybe I should do this instead, and you just end up spiraling. So for me, having a coach meant having someone to, yeah, cut out the noise, to kind of like put the blinders on for me so I can narrow my focus a little bit and be able to really just get the information I needed for me to use my money the way I want to use my money. And so the things that were really important for me were we figured out my value system, which so much of it lies in freedom. And freedom is like the underlying value for someone who wants to travel. So that's what we talked about a lot. And so having that sort of freedom was super, super important to me. And so at the end of all of our sessions, Clover and I figured out how to kind of rejig that money that my ex had helped me invest, but also talk a little bit about where all of my assets are. And actually, to that point, that was probably the scariest part for me. It wasn't even the value system. I have never disclosed my full net worth to anyone before other than my mother. And to have to tell someone was really, really scary at first. And then after I did that, after I told Clover, because this is an important part of how she can help you coach you, she needs to know that number. It includes, you know, all of your assets plus all of your debt plus all of your everything. So everything money related, she needs to know to help you. But to tell someone that number was, yeah, scary at first. But then I started to like test it out in the real world, you know. I was hanging out with friends and I was like, so I'm doing this money coaching thing, and like I was talking about my net worth, and maybe I could tell you my net worth and maybe you won't judge me. And so I tested it out on a few friends, and my friend was saying like, before I told him, he was like, you know my net worth. We talk about my money all the time, but we never talk about your money. Like, do you feel differently about me? Like, are you judging me for my net worth? And I was like, no, not at all. 0% judgment from me. So he's like, so why would you think I would be judging you? So I was like, you're right. We should be talking about this more openly. And for me, the fear comes from whether you have more money than your friends think you have, or you have less money than your friends think you have. I feel like it changes the way they view you. So suddenly, when you go out to eat and you're like, oh, that's kind of expensive, I don't want to go to that restaurant, they're either thinking, what are you worried about? You have all that money, you can afford this restaurant. Or they're thinking, oh, right, like I shouldn't have suggested that restaurant. Like I feel bad, like she can't afford it. So to me, those are the kind of thoughts I was having about what people, my perception of what people were thinking about me and my value. However, they're your friends. They're not thinking those things. So I was really just like overthinking it in my head. So for me, this experience allowed me to be a little bit more open about my money, and I'm more comfortable talking about it now and also talking to others about it, which is nice. And so I think for me, this program was, yeah, foundational to me understanding how to um, understand my investments, but also understanding myself. So Really, really powerful program, I think. Um, and yeah, we have like 15 minutes left. We do have one more question, which I think we could probably actually open up to the audience. I would love to hear um, why do you love traveling? Because I think that's probably something we all have in common. Why do you love traveling? And whether you want to pop that into the chat or you want to like raise your hand and turn your mic off to join us in the conversation, we can start with that. And then we'll open up the floor to a Q&A session. So I'm sure after listening to all this, you probably have your own burning money questions that you want to ask Clover, so we can open up the floor too. But I would love to start with, why do you love traveling? And I'll put that
Yeah.
in the chat.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for sharing your experience with the program and that you took a lot from it. It makes me really happy. So, why do I love traveling? I think it's the sense of empowerment that I get to have, getting out of my comfort zone, and also the connections that I get to make. People are usually so open-minded, and we're in this like adventurous place where we're just exploring places together, and just that bond that you get to have when you're having those experiences, it's just like, oh, so fulfilling. And so that is why I love traveling. And how
Mm-hmm.
about you, Justine?
Okay, I don't know if anyone saw this, but in the Asian Wonder Women Facebook community group, someone shared an article from, I want to say, the New York Times, but someone wrote an anti-travel article, essentially talking about why traveling is bad.
Mhm.
I read through the article, I skimmed the article, and I did not agree with anything they said, essentially. But that's why we have free press. You're welcome. Everyone's welcome to their own opinions. But essentially, the argument against traveling was that we are all like sheep people, and we are just doing it because this is what's trendy and this is what we're told we're supposed to do. And we're told these are the things you'll learn from traveling. And sure, part of it is we are influenced by, if you see other people on Instagram, let's say traveling, you're like, oh, that's what I want to do. Like, that's the dream life. Like, I wish I could be there. There's a little bit of that. But also, it really depends on how you approach your travels, right? Depends on what you do when you travel. It can totally change the experience for you. I would argue that a lot of people who are traveling as influencers, they may not be getting the full experience of travel because your focus is, this is your job. You need to make content. You need to take good photos. You need to eat at all the best places. You need to stay at these luxurious, photo worthy places. And it totally changes the experience. That is like, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's one lifestyle. And then the other lifestyle could be, like Clover was saying, she's more interested in slow travel now. Slow travel is, I think, something that's really amazing because you can really immerse yourself in a culture, with the people, in a neighborhood, like really get to know one place really well. And so for me, I'm also leaning more towards slow travel these days because for me, it's all about the people as well. My two like top values were definitely freedom and then like community and social. Like that aspect of my life is huge. And so for me to connect with others is really, really important. And I think for me, when I travel, it's less about where I go. Yes, it's always fun and exciting if you go to a new place or even to revisit an old place that you love. But more importantly, the thing that I remember from my travels is always the people I meet along the way. It's always about the people. So that can make or break an experience. Like you could be in a place that you're having a really bad time in. You're just like, I miss home. There's no food I like here. I don't know. There's like nothing fun to do in the city. And then suddenly you meet someone and they're just like, hey, why don't we like go take a walk by the beach? And you're like, I don't really want to. And they're like, come on, come on. And you're like, okay, fine. And then you end up having the best day ever, So it's really about the people you're around, the energy you surround yourself with, and you can have like a totally different experience. So for me, traveling is definitely about the people as well. Yeah. Would anyone else like to chime in about why they love travel? Angela, yeah. Feel free to unmute.
Thanks. It's my first time using the raise hand function in Skype, so I'm glad that worked. Um, but I think for me, I love travel because, as cliche as it sounds, it's just getting to know the different cultures, but also as a way of getting to know yourself. I think it's really easy to sort of operate in a capacity that you think is really normal and you sort of identify with it. And then you go somewhere else and you realize that that may be totally strange and you may have that value or act a certain way, or believe a certain thing because of where you are or the culture, or the people around you. So I find that it's a great way to sort of meet these different versions of yourself as well, and just getting to sort of immerse, like, maybe parts of yourself that you thought were strange where you live or where you were, and then sort of putting them in context in a greater, like, global perspective of it's not strange, it's just you have a different value system than what is right around you.
I love that. I love that. And then on top of this question, I will just reiterate, if you have questions related to money, you can also ask them. We don't only have to talk about the love of travel, but the love of travel is very much connected to this money conversation because you need money to travel. So understanding why you love to travel is like step one of understanding your value system and then what you want to put your money towards. So that's why we're asking the question. But if you have any like specific money questions or questions for Clover, you can also ask those as well. Or if you want to tell us more, Christine.
Hi, Clover.
Hi, Justine.
Thank you so much for sharing your journey. I think what I struggle with the most is letting go of a lack of abundance mindset when it comes to money. Like I grew up like kind of poor and just we just didn't spend on things and all that. And I was wondering like how you approach that with your clients. Like how do you do you have any tips or advice that you could share that gives some insight as to how that mindset switches to like an abundance mindset?
Such a great question. I do encounter that quite a lot. The first step is actually to accept that you have a lack mindset. Have you heard of the phrase like what you resist persists? So if we say, oh, a lack mindset is bad, I gotta like step into abundance, and like it creates so much resistance that it's almost like you're labeling one thing bad versus good. But when we accept that everything is the tool, then we can actually relax into it. Of course, we're want to be frugal if we come from a family that is needing to survive. So it's actually a great skill in a way that we're able to save and do all of that. Just so honoring what that is for us and what it has done for us. And now the next step would be, how can I feel more safe in my body actually? So with lack mentality, our mind usually starts spinning with all these like what if thoughts of the future. Oh, I'm going to starve on the street if I like spend too much money. That is my thought mainly. All these different doubts that are creeping up in our mind. But if we can actually feel like create safety where we're like, we actually have food on our table. We're okay right now. Now, processing those emotions like through my embodiment coaching practice, and then we look at the strategy. What is actually an action step we can take now to create actual abundance, right? With how much money we can save. Are there creative ways you can maybe make more income or save more money to create that net worth? And a lot of times when you know what your actual like financial independence number is, it actually relaxes you as well. So that's kind of the process I take people through. I do have to say it takes a little bit of time because you've been programmed with that for a long time for the rest of your life. And it's just about, allowing yourself grace and compassion through the process of acknowledging that, okay, I have this lack mindset. I'm going to accept it as a tool. And how can I, feel more safe in my body so it's no longer in survival mode and trust that there's more coming your way, especially with the strategy of money as well. Does that answer your question?
That was awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And you know what I realized? When I set up the Luma link for this event, I put in a prompt of like, does anyone have any questions for Clover? And I didn't go back to check. If anyone asked questions over there that I did not address, that is the reason why. So if you wanted to ask them here, you're totally welcome to. But it just occurred to me while you were talking. I was like, oh shoot, I forgot to do that thing.
Oh, good. Oh, good.
Yeah, if Clover, how would people like connect with you if they wanted to get into the program?
Yeah, you can follow me on Instagram. It's called at authentic.abundance. And I'm also on TikTok. And my website is authentic-abundance.com. You're more than welcome to DM me. I also offer a free 30 minutes consultation. If you need me to maybe point out some blind spots for you or just like talk about money or even anything in life, you're more than welcome to. I love the connections I get to make with people. And then if to see this program is the right fit for you, there's absolutely no pressure. It's just about knowing each other and see if we can work together.
Yeah, and I think the thing about that is it is a bit like finding a therapist. Because
yeah, do I fit?
you have to find the right fit. You can like meet and talk with so many therapists, but until you find someone that you really connect with, like you're not going to make the progress you want to make. And so similarly, when you talk about money with someone, if they have a totally different mindset than you and a very different approach than you're comfortable with, yes, you could just like blindly follow their advice, but also you won't connect with it. You probably won't stick with it. You will have a hard time understanding why you're doing what you're doing. Like, okay, sure, yes, I can put the money here, but why would I do that? So I think it is important that you work with a money coach that you feel a connection with, or you feel at least connected to the way that the methodology that they use, I want to say. Yeah, so today's session was not only about, introducing Clover, but also hopefully helping you understand a little bit about like what you should look for when you're looking to expand your financial knowledge. Yeah. So I think that wraps up our session today, unless anyone has any more questions.
I did see Angela was typing in the chat earlier. I'm not sure if she wants to ask a question. If not, no pressure at all. It's okay.
Wow, I didn't know that there was that functionality in Skype. So I didn't get to fully formulate my thought, but I guess something that I run into with money is this idea of like, what is enough? Is there such thing as enough? And maybe that's tied to scarcity and abundance. But I think especially coming from like parents who are immigrants in that traditional story of like really doing everything they can to give us every opportunity, I think sometimes I struggle with like what is enough money.
Amazing question. There is actually a formula for that. So the FI number, the financial independence number, actually gives you a pretty accurate number of what you want to work with. So it's your annual expenses, like what you're spending right now, times 25. So an example would be, just to kind of a round out number, it's easier to measure. If you spend $3,333, which means $40,000 a year, times 25 equals 1 million. So then you know that, oh, you need $1 million to create a portfolio that gives me $3,333 a month to live off of. Now, you can obviously tweak the numbers. So just understanding like how much money do you actually need right now to sustain yourself, that gives you a bit more accurate picture of at least a number to work with. Because otherwise, you're right, like what is enough? Like people say a few millions, a million a year, 10,000 a month, like that is so personal. Of course that evolves and changes as well, but at least working with the awareness of like, at least right now, how much are you paying with all your expenses, with rent, food, all of that, then you can calculate that number for yourself.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And I think it's important to say when Clover says that number, it doesn't mean you need to have $1 million today.
No, That's right. That's right. Something that you work towards, and it's the number where you will be financially independent, meaning that you no longer need an active income because you're now eating off of your investments. And that means you can stop working or keep working if you want, but at least it's optional.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so these are all tools and like knowledge that Clover has in her brain that she can share with you. So if you are interested, definitely connect with her. But if that's everything for today, then I will say thank you so much, everybody. We are at time. Really appreciate you being here and participating. And we hope to see you at the next fireside. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, Justine.